Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Miller and I'm the CEO here at MacKillop Family Services. We begin today by acknowledging country and the lands on which we are all meeting from across Australia. I'm on Boonwurrung land and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and acknowledge all Aboriginal leaders that are here with us today. And I extend that very warm welcome to all of our guests, and we're delighted to have close to 300 people from across Australia. And I thank you for joining us to celebrate the launch of the evaluation of our work to prevent the sexual exploitation of young people in residential care. This week is the 30th anniversary of Child Protection Week. And at MacKillop, we are passionate about rights-based practice, about the rights of every young person to feel safe and to be safe, particularly when they're in care. We are very proud to share the results of our Power to Kids Respecting Sexual Safety program. It's been 3 years of piloting this in partnership with the University of Melbourne, and we are particularly grateful for the support of Professor Kathy Humphries and Dr. Gemma McGibbon, who'll be speaking with us today. By way of housekeeping, before we get started, just to let you know, the session will be recorded and will be shared with our guests later this week. We won't be taking live questions today, we have too many. However, if you would like to share some comments, you're welcome to use the chat function. And following this session, we will send around a short survey and we will also be holding a separate panel discussion at a later date. The format will be around 50 minutes, where we will be hearing from Minister Luke Dinellan, the Victorian Minister for Child Protection, who will officially launch our evaluation, Dr. Gemma McGibbon, who is our research partner from the University of Melbourne, and then some of our frontline carers. Leanna Buchanan will be our respondent. Leanna is the Principal Commissioner for the Victorian Commission for Children and Young People. But just by way of introduction, the origins of this program go well beyond this pilot. The Victorian Child Protection Service started a major review and reform to tackle the awful problem of sexual exploitation of young people in residential care well over a decade ago. And as part of that work, I was involved in developing more effective, joined up responses between child protection, the police and the agencies providing care. However, we knew we needed to do more, and we needed to support our frontline carers who spend actually the longest amount of time with young people. In Australia today, we know there are approximately 45,000 young people in care, children and young people. And the vast majority of them are in kinship care, a smaller group in foster care, and only a tiny 6% are in residential care. But the work of the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse, and I was privileged to work within the Commission for almost 2 years, found that of that 6%, if you looked at the amount of reports of sexual abuse, 33% of the reports of sexual abuse in care came from that tiny 6%. So nationally in Australia, we have an enormous problem. And predators are very tuned into the vulnerability of these young people. And online grooming is ubiquitous. So we needed to do more to help our carers to feel more equipped, to know how to engage with young people, to have the difficult conversations and to know the warning signs and what to do. The Royal Commission found that there was no evidence-based program to prevent sexual abuse of kids in care. Most of them have had multiple placement breakdowns before they've come to residential care and have often missed out on a lot of schooling where they may have been exposed to respectful behaviours, sort of curriculum, etc. Most of their sex education was actually coming from pornography. And as awful as that sounds, that's the truth of it. So we, as a system, needed to be able to face this and be better equipped. We needed to understand the warning bells, that when kids go missing from placement, that's the key indicator actually for sexual exploitation. The research evidence is in on that. We needed to help carers who found it awkward to talk about sex education, to talk about the dating violence that many of our young people were engaging in and being exposed to. So these 3 areas were the target of our program: preventing harmful sexual behaviours between young people, what's sometimes known as child-to-child or peer-to-peer abuse, preventing the sexual exploitation and preventing dating violence. We know that there's often a real disconnect between the policy world, the research world, and the real world of frontline practice. And so my passion has been, since coming to MacKillop, to engage with our academic partners at the University of Melbourne to really make a difference. So today is a particularly joyful day for me to be able to launch this research. And I want to thank sincerely everyone that's been involved, the champions, the frontline workers, the young people themselves. When we were working up the design of the program, we of course involved the young people. And one quick story, I asked one young man who was 14, we had this group session called a focus group, and the kids were actually getting a bit sort of fractious, and I had a conversation with this 14-year-old boy, young man, and he was very, very insightful. And I said, well, what do you think about the program? And he said, well, for a start, Robin, the name of it's awful. It's very uncool, very daggy. At that point, the title was Respecting Sexual Safety. And he said, it's really uncool. And I said, well, what do you reckon we should call it? And he said, you know, the main thing is that I've learnt is just how manipulative these people are and how they trick you. And they give you drugs, they give you presents. One bloke even offered me new runners, offered me driving lessons. That's what they do. He said, you know what? He said, it's about getting power back. It's about understanding they're not really your friends. They don't really care about you, and giving the power back. And so that's how the name Power to Kids was formed. So we couldn't do this without funding. The MacKillop board was gracious and allowed me to seed the funding and engage with University of Melbourne. We were then able to secure funding from the John T. Reid Charitable Trust in 2017, and that's been over the past 3 years, which we are incredibly grateful for. And then we were able to leverage this grant to secure additional funds from the Department of Health and Human Services and the Centre for Excellence for Child Welfare, and we were on our way. So I'm going to leave it to Gemma to talk about the detail of the project, but I did want to share one quick story before I finish. And that's the story of a carer who was absolutely so pleased because she wanted to make a difference, but couldn't do that because she said that she didn't have the skills. And it wasn't until she'd actually had the resources and done the training and then experienced the coaching from our sexual health nurse, Anna, who we were able to employ through the funding, that she felt that she could finally be equipped to know how to engage with young people. I actually want to now introduce Minister Donnellan to officially launch our program. Luke Donnellan is Minister for Child Protection, Disability, Ageing and Carers in the Victorian Labor Government led by Premier Daniel Andrews. He's an outstanding minister, has a genuine passion for this work, and we are very, very grateful for his time this morning and his willingness to celebrate Child Protection Week with us at MacKillop and to launch this evaluation. Thank you very much, Minister Donnellan.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you very much. I'd firstly like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land upon which we stand and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. Acknowledge them as the longest living civilisation in the world and how fortunate we are to be on their lands. Robin, thanks for allowing me to say a few words today, and thanks for the really good work. This week is National Child Protection Week, and I can't imagine a more difficult period for people in child protection. You know, line of sight is shortened, to put it mildly. You know, the contact points we usually have in terms of school and things like that are not necessarily there the whole time. So it is an incredibly difficult time for people in child protection, and I just want to sort of say, I guess, thank you during this bloody difficult period. Thank you for the work, and I guess more than anything else, the love and the passion you put into our young ones. And really, you know, that's probably the most important thing, that love and passion to give our children a better future, to be blunt, and to develop them into better, you know, more skilled individuals. So, look, I've got my, as you're well aware, Robin, I've got my young person's advisory group. And I will say one of the topics we haven't touched on to date is sexuality and exploitation. Now, you know, there's good reasons for that, because I'm definitely not skilled in that space, and it would be a pretty stupid idea of a minister to think that, you know, you're going to touch subjects like that when you don't have the skill base, the understanding and the right approach. So I guess that highlights to me, I've definitely left that alone, but I'm overjoyed that you haven't left it alone, to put it mildly, and also University of Melbourne and Gemma and the team haven't left it alone and have actually said, okay, this is a pathway to, I guess, developing, one, the skills of the children, to identify the people who exploit them, to understand what that's all about, to, in a sense, as you're saying, for what that young man said, to get control of the power, to have an equal but a more powerful relationship with people who are trying to exploit you, and maybe, not being rude, maybe exploit those miserable bastards in return. Sorry, and I know I'm a little bit aggressive about those things, but that type of behaviour, well, you know what I mean. I'm intolerant to that type of behaviour, which is probably not the right way of approaching it, but it just makes me very angry. So I guess really what I wanted to say was, yes, we're doing a lot of training of residential workers, but you know, it's broad-based training. This is going to be invaluable for how to address that topic. My discomfort in addressing that topic is substantial, and that's why it's been on the list for our Young Persons Advisory Committee for the last 3 sessions, and I'm overjoyed we actually haven't got there, because I certainly don't want to do it incorrectly, but I'm overjoyed that you're giving the residential workers the skills to actually be able to approach that, because it is essential. It is certain. I wasn't aware, I'll be blunt, that the fact that that our young people abscond from residential care, and that is frequently related to sexual exploitation. So I wasn't aware of that. So that's probably indictment of the minister himself and not being aware of that. But I just want to say, well done. Well done that it's, you know, you've actually gone through the process of doing it in a rigorous way. You've actually had the specialists at Melbourne Uni oversee it. Not that you're not well skilled in that base yourself, Robin, but I just think the fact that it now will be used to provide knowledge and skills and information to the rest of the sector is bloody marvellous, to put it mildly. So, you know, congratulations for putting this team together. Congratulations to the work you've done. And I very much look forward to, you know, to be blunt, the better outcomes and measuring those better outcomes. And for me, it is not about child protection per se. For me, it's about child development. And we've got to move towards the idea that we're not just holding these children in a protective state, but that we're actually taking their skill base forward and giving them skills to be great members of our community and being able to enjoy all the benefits they possibly could in any community. So well done, and thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words, and I'll now listen, be quiet and learn a little bit more. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister Donnellan. It's I think your passion and your genuineness really shines through, and I know it's something that does motivate all of us, so we're grateful to you. Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Gemma McGibbon. Gemma is a research fellow in the Department of Social Work at the University of Melbourne, working with Professor Kathy Humphries under the Melbourne Research Alliance to end violence against women and their children. Gemma has a background in gender studies, and she actually completed her PhD looking at the prevention of harmful sexual behaviours. So I was ideally placed when I met her a few years ago, and we got talking, and I said, you're exactly who we need, because we need to co-design, and then we need your expertise in this action research and a proper evaluation. We need to develop the evidence base. So over to Gemma, who can talk about the process over the past 3 years and the findings from the research.
Thank you very much, Robin. And I'd just like to say as well how delighted I am to have got to this point in the project, and that we're here today to celebrate, I think, what is a really special piece of work. And also just to say a warm thank you to Minister Donnellan and Commissioner Buchanan for being with us and supporting our launch. It's very, very meaningful, so thank you. So I'm going to be talking today about some of the main findings from the evaluation, and I want to start with a quote. And this was a quote from a 12-year-old boy, and this is what he said to me when I asked him what he'd do about sexual exploitation. He said, "I'd tell the workers about sexual exploitation. Whatever I tell the workers, it goes in the books, and whatever goes in the books goes to the department, and whatever goes to the department, it goes to the police, and whatever goes to the police comes back here." And this quote really resonated with me because it showed such faith in us as public parents and such faith in our system. And I really don't want this little boy to lose that faith. And I think that the Power to Kids program, I'm hopeful that it goes some way towards maintaining this boy's faith in our system. So as Robin mentioned, the methodology underpinning the project was an action research one. And really action research is where industry and universities partner up and they identify a problem. And our problem was child sexual abuse in out-of-home care. And then you get your policymakers, your practitioners, your kids with lived experience, and you get the evidence base and you read it all together. And you come up with what you think is the best possible intervention that we can trial in this space. So you co-design it. Everybody's input goes into it, and it's quite a complex beast, I must say. So then you trial the intervention, and you then incorporate the learnings that are emerging as you go. So it's an iterative process. And then you have to work on sustaining and upscaling the intervention, which is no easy feat in itself. So the intervention we co-designed were these 3 prevention strategies. So the first strategy was the whole of house respectful relationships and sexuality education. And that was really about capacity building carers to have brave conversations with children and young people about the 10 topics you can see there on your screen. So the Brave Conversations model comes from Faulkner and colleagues in the US, and it's a trauma-informed, provides a trauma-informed framework for having these really difficult conversations. And our sexual health nurse educator, she give her all credit for bringing the Brave Conversations into the program. So we worked with the TALK model, and the TALK model is how to sort of guide or assist the carers to have the conversation. So the T stands for take the initiative. The A stands for ask the child what they think. And the L stands for let them know the facts and let them know the range of beliefs around particular sexual health and safety topics. And the K stands for keep the conversation going. So the second prevention strategy is the missing from home strategy. And that was targeting, that's a secondary prevention strategy in that it's targeting the risk factor of going missing from home. Because as Robin said, we know that's the biggest red flag for sexual exploitation. So how did we target that? We wanted to really strengthen the relationships between the carers and the young people. And we wanted to support them to stay in touch when they were away from the house, like we do with our teenage kids when they're not home. And we also wanted to capacity build carers to undertake assertive outreach when kids were missing. The third prevention strategy, the sexual safety response, was about a therapeutic and practice response when kids are already experiencing either harmful sexual behaviour, child sexual exploitation, or dating violence. So these were some of our key findings. So the Brave Conversations actually enhanced the safety of children and young people. Children and young people were missing less and staying in touch more. And all the strategies had to work together. It was like all the wheels had to spin at once. The Brave Conversations needed to happen when the exit practice was happening. or when the therapeutic response to harmful sexual behaviour was happening. So just a little bit more about the Brave Conversations. What we found here was that when Anna, our sexual health nurse educator, capacity built the carers to have the Brave Conversations, the carers began to feel more comfortable and confident, and they started to initiate those Brave Conversations over the course of the day as opportunities arose. Okay, there's no one big sexual health talk. There are lots of little conversations over years and years and years of children's lives. And what we found, and this was a bit of a surprise, which I really enjoyed sort of discovering, what we found was that the impact of the Brave Conversations wasn't only that the knowledge of the young people increased around sexual health and safety, it was that the quality of the relationship between carers and young people improved and was enhanced. And that actually ended up being a really significant protective factor for the kids. So this area manager said, I think it's the relationship she has with the staff that has changed. She feels safe in talking about what she's doing, where she's going. There's a trust being built where they make an agreement where she'll have her phone and answer it, and that's been happening. So missing less and staying in touch. Now, this was music to our ears. So we found that really kids were missing less and that they were staying home more. So this area manager said, I noticed with the region, kids are staying in contact a bit more and nights at home have increased. Yes, we've got acute concerns with one particular young woman, but the more we've been interrupting that, we've interrupted that concerning person of interest, that situation. But what we are noticing with that young woman is that her going missing has certainly reduced. She stays in contact most 90% of the time. Okay, the third finding, this is really important. So the strategies, as I said, had to all work together and they had to really align with the policy and practice of external agencies to MacKillop. So this really points to the importance of multi-agency practice in the space, particularly of exiting children and young people from sexual exploitation. So this case manager said, we've had, I would say, upwards of 5, 6, 7 circuit breakers for girl experienced sexual exploitation when things have gotten that bad. We had regular consults with the sexual exploitation practice leader and high-risk youth panels and anything that you can think of for the girl. There's been like the file reviews, sexual exploitation templates, names of persons of interest, addresses. We've had meetings with police on several occasions. And in fact, before I just move on to this slide, it was just, you know, really important. We did work with this notion of the 4 Ps. And I think in terms of sexual exploitation, it was around, you know, alerting the principal practitioners for MacKillop and the sexual exploitation practice leaders and working with police and working with the sexual exploitation protocol and really persevering. The thing with sexual exploitation is that it's very, very difficult to disrupt. And perpetrators, as soon as one disruption happens, perpetrators can, another perpetrator can come on the scene very quickly and you find yourself in the same situation. So perseverance is fundamental in this space. But I wanted to finish with this quote, which is about becoming an informed friend. And in the program, we talked about being an informed friend as someone who, if they notice that a peer is being sexually abused or exploited, that they can actually identify that as abuse and get help for their peers. Because what you see is that, you know, sometimes kids are out in groups and one kid is being sexually exploited and their peer knows that something's wrong, but they don't quite know what's wrong and they don't know how to get help for their friend. So this girl said to me, the program did teach me to not allow things like, or if I see a friend or relative or somebody that I know, or even anybody going through sexual abuse, to not just allow them to go through that. If they can't voice for themselves, then I can do it. That's sort of where, obviously, I learnt to make sure that if I ever was to come across somebody that was going through an experience like that, to make sure to always let somebody know so that the situation gets taken care of and that person remains safe. So just to finish up, this project has been an absolute team effort, and it takes a village to raise children as public parents. So just a few acknowledgements to the children and young people themselves who participated, to our funders, as Robin has mentioned, to my dear supervisor, Professor Kathy Humphreys, who supervised this program and project as my postdoctoral research project. Of course, to Robin, Nick Halfpenny and Anna Freed, our sexual health nurse educator, to my colleagues at the university, Anna Bornamisa and Madeline Smales, to our amazing champions, carers and workers, and of course to our expert advisory board, who we worked pretty hard. So thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Robin.
Thanks very much, Gemma. As Gemma mentioned, we were privileged to have a fantastic advisory board with us throughout the process over the last 3 years. And many of those experts lived interstate, came to Melbourne to work on this, and provided the continuation, if you like, of the work that they'd done in their own research and also through the Royal Commission. So that has absolutely value added. The importance of champions can't be underestimated, and Jamie Hall's now going to talk for a couple of minutes. Jamie's one of our residential care supervisors, a house supervisor, and she's worked in residential care for 4 years and has become a real champion of this program. So Jamie, your front of mind response to what the program's meant for you.
Thank you, Robin, for that beautiful introduction. And I just wanted to say how grateful I have been to be a part of this program and to be here today. This program, I think, has made a massive difference in the work me and my colleagues do. I've been in residential care for 4 years. I started as a casual and worked across multiple different homes in the north and the south of Melbourne. And as Robin said, I'm now supervising in a house in the south. When I started in residential care, if a young person brought up a sexual issue to me, it would be really kind of awkward to manage, and I didn't really know what I was allowed to say back, and I would often just refer them on to an expert or a pamphlet. And today I'm so much more comfortable. I am about to share a bit of an anecdote that actually involves pornography, and I never thought I'd be able to have that conversation with a young person, let alone in front of almost 300 people. So I just want to talk a little bit to the whole of house approach that Gemma mentioned, and also the Brave Conversations and how that leads to really deepened connections for the young people. So I have a story. A while ago, I had a 16-year-old young person I was working with, and she had been really experiencing quite a bit of, she was missing from home a lot. We had a lot of concerns that there was sexual exploitation going on, but she wasn't making any disclosures or talking to us about it. So we really implemented this whole of house approach. We had all of the education, all of our staff were educated. We had posters and resources up on the walls. And this young person actually came to me at one point and said that she had a virus on her phone from watching pornography. And in the past, I might have kind of shrugged that off or said that was bad, which I now know would have shut down the conversation. Whereas how I actually responded was to tell her that I would get her phone to IT to get the virus taken off it. We spoke about different people having different values around pornography, but that there are some facts that she should know if she was going to watch it. So I actually grabbed one of those posters provided by the RSS program, and we talked about the impacts that pornography can have on developing brains and how it doesn't show consent, and it has unrealistic expectations for sexual relationships and people's bodies, and it can often show a lot of violence towards women. And we had a really open conversation. I actually also used a video that was provided by the sexual health nurse, and that led to a much closer relationship with that young person. And she was later down the track able to make disclosures and ask staff to support her to make reports to police and engage in that process, which was just really amazing.
But you can see why we're so proud of our staff at MacKillop, and Jamie's work is exemplary, and it's just been a great pleasure seeing the development and the support and the difference it's made. Jackie O'Neill has worked as a carer at MacKillop, with MacKillop for over 14 years, and is now in a leadership position within our residential care program. And Jackie, your reflections, if you wouldn't mind coming online now. see if your camera works.
Oh, Robin, I am having some technical difficulties, unfortunately, but I think I've got it up and running now.
You're looking beautiful, Jackie.
So thank you, Robin. Yes, thank you. And such a great opportunity to talk about our respecting sexual safety. I guess, I was a supervisor out at our Station Road home and was part of the pilot of respecting sexual safety. So being one of the very first staff members to have been trained. And as you said, I've been in out-of-home care now for 14 years. And over that time, I've worked with many young people and many staff. And I think early years, it was very clear to me that for some of our carers, having some of these brave and very challenging conversations, were incredibly challenging. And at times I felt some of those conversations were avoided. And for every conversation that was avoided, it was an opportunity that was lost. Because in my experience, it tells me that we don't always get those opportunities back again. That's something that we want to avoid at all costs, because if a young person is willing to have any of these conversations, we need to be willing to be part of those conversations. So, I just, one of the examples, and we're currently working with a young girl in our care at our Station Road home, and incredibly high risk to sexual exploitation, but incredibly volatile when it came to our carers. Having those conversations with her became incredibly heightened and could be quite threatening and very uncomfortable. And so with some of our carers being trained with the respecting sexual safety training, we identified a champion at house. So arming our champion with some of the tools and some of the resources, she was able to gradually have some of those conversations, not with adult language, not with punitive language, but that our young person was able to understand, and therefore avoiding triggering her. So when we weren't triggering her anymore, it meant that we could engage in conversations. And we were on her level. So, taking those punitive conversations away. And so with some persistence and over time, our young girl became incredibly involved in her safety planning. Watching this transformation was, and I feel a little bit emotional because I've worked with this young girl for so long. So watching this transformation was, it was amazing. And, this young girl is now so much part of her safety planning and, is now looking at leaving our care. So she's now transitioning into independent living. And I'm so excited watching that for her and, hoping that when we send her off, that we'll send her off safely and that we will arm her with the tools to be able to avoid being sexually exploited. And I would also like to touch on, I mentioned the resources. Again, in one of our therapeutic homes, we have a young girl there who's been diagnosed with autism. So making it incredibly challenging for her to understand some of the dangers online. So with a little bit, she wants a phone. All our kids want smartphones, and we know, with the smartphones that how, that comes with certain challenges. So with the respecting sexual safety resources, we have some specific resources that are to help us with kids that have been diagnosed with autism or with disabilities. And that allows our carers, Robin, to be able to complete online safety training with our kids. Again, giving the power back to the kids, giving the power, the kids the understanding of what they're able to do and keep themselves safe. And, Robin, not all our children that come into our care have been sexually exploited. And so this will give us also the opportunity when our staff are trained and have the tools and the resources to help these young people avoid being sexually exploited, because they can have these very brave conversations. They have the tools now to have those very conversations, because some of our kids are so disconnected from their education that they're not receiving this. You know, they're not doing any sex education at school. So for the adults in their life, which is a lot of our carers, Robin, they're the people that they will come to have those conversations, and hopefully we'll see those conversations not be avoided.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And having role models such as Jackie and Jamie is so important, and modelling how to talk with kids and how to help staff to feel comfortable. We've now got kids coming to us to talk about their bodies, to talk about how they feel about their boyfriend, or what's this online, or this has popped up on my phone, or I'm really worried about, you know, a mate. Boys become sexually exploited as well as girls. And we know now that we've got kids who are actually looking out for each other and then coming to talk to our carers about it. One of the mistakes is that we think, oh, sending somebody off for an hour's counselling a fortnight is going to do it. It just doesn't. Often they won't keep the appointment, or the real moment, the window of opportunity is often 2 in the morning, or when you're driving somebody back in the car, just like with your own kids. You know, sometimes the best conversations are in the driveway, in the car, where you're sort of in a safe bubble. So we know that helping carers to be able to use those magic times, those moments before kids go to sleep, when they do come home late, to make the cup of hot chocolate, to sit down and have a chat casually, and then it's just amazing what will come out then. And then having the skills then to work with our partners in child protection, the counselling services, and also with police. And our police colleagues have been outstanding, can I say. That whole notion of disruptive policing is really important. So before I introduce Commissioner Leanna Buchanan, I just want to outline the recommendations that have come from the research, and this is very important. The program should be upscaled is the key recommendation, and we're certainly doing that at MacKillop. We're also upscaling it across our foster care program. The key recommendation is that a sexual health nurse educator role be funded to undertake all aspects of the prevention strategy. And this is something that's been incredibly important, and Anna is greatly valued within MacKillop, our sexual health nurse, who's trained the champions to train the carers to be with the kids. And it's the coaching and the reflective practice sessions that make the difference. The initial training is important, but the embedding and the implementation science around it is what's really made the difference. And that whole of house approach, that it's not just one person who's trained, that it's the culture within the home, that we have a zero tolerance. In the old days, this behaviour was sort of seen, and kids going missing was seen as, and even if the so-called boyfriend was 40 years old, and giving them drugs, and people knew that, it was like risk-taking behaviour, or that's what resi kids do. Well, actually, no, it's not. It's abuse, and it shouldn't be happening, and zero tolerance. So the other recommendation is that all carers are upskilled in having these brave conversations about sexual health and safety, and having those conversations with children and young people. And that further action research should be commissioned, and we want to do that, to building on the success of this pilot and the sexuality education, using the relationship-based approach. And that further collaborative initiatives that focus on sexual exploitation, dating, violence, and preventing harmful sexual behaviours between kids, together with disruptive policing and therapeutic outreach, should be trialled and evaluated. We have to keep building the evidence base and scaling up. Replication and having peer-reviewed journal articles is how you get the evidence base acknowledged. So this is a unique opportunity now, not to drop the ball, but to keep going and to build on this. Commissioner Leanna Buchanan is a great woman in Victoria, and she's our Principal Commissioner for Children and Young People. She began her work in April 2016 and has been a passionate advocate for children and young people, for safety and for rights-based practice. She has a strong background in social justice and many accomplishments as a lawyer, and she was also the Executive Officer of the Federation of Community Legal Centres, where she led the peak body for Victoria's 50 community legal centres. So she's passionate about social justice, about improving our sector and the lives of children and young people. So thank you, Leanna, for your time. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Robin, and indeed everyone involved in today for inviting me to be part of it. I too would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all, from wherever we're dialing in, standing or sitting today. And indeed, I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, whose land I'm currently on, and pay my deep respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This, for me, like for, I suspect, everybody on this call, is an issue I care deeply about and I'm passionate about. And indeed, I think we've heard that from everyone, including, I've got to acknowledge the Minister's passion for this issue. I suppose one of the things that makes my role different and maybe a little unique is it's part of my role to, at times when it serves the purposes of children and young people, articulate hard to confront and uncomfortable truths. So part of what I'm going to talk about today is why I think this work, this focus on preventing sexual harm of children in residential care is so important. And indeed why, as Robin just said, this is not a time for us to drop the ball. Not long before I started as Commissioner, the Commission under Bernie Geary had tabled a report on precisely these issues, sexual abuse and exploitation in residential care, back in 2015. It laid out, as you know or can imagine, a confronting level of sexual abuse and exploitation of children in Resi. By 2016, there was a significant focus on sexual exploitation, particularly in Victoria. In my first period as Commissioner, I observed the enhanced response model operating in a number of jurisdictions as pilots, with police working with child protection and residential care agencies. We had new sexual exploitation practice leaders well and truly up and running. Massive training had been rolled out across child protection and residential care workforces. There was an incredibly high level interdepartmental committee that brought together all of the senior players from across government and police, centralised recording, centralised reporting and analysis within the department. Really an impressive effort. In that same year, as Robin I think alluded to, the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse published in a consultation paper on out-of-home care a material that highlighted the same kinds of issues. And of course, as we know and are celebrating today, the partnership between MacKillop and the University of Melbourne on this project was in its early stages. So if I look back to that, that's 4 or 5 years ago. Where are we now? Why do I think this is still so important, if not more so than ever? Well, I think we all know that the drivers of sexual abuse and exploitation of children, including children in residential care, are complex, and there are many drivers, and many of them are deeply entrenched. They require multiple strategies, and they need those strategies to be sustained and persistent. Unfortunately, as I've shared with the department, I think some of that centralised coordinated focus on tackling sexual exploitation of children in care has fallen away. That's part of the reason I've initiated an inquiry into children going missing or absent from residential care, because, as we've already heard, the connection between children going missing and children being caught up in sexual exploitation is well understood. That inquiry is ongoing, and I have to say, for the purposes of today's report, we'll be considering this report very, very closely as we frame up our recommendations from that inquiry. But the fact is that I continue in my job as Children's Commissioner to see high numbers of incidents of sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of children reported to me in the matters that come through to me as Commissioner. Since new reporting systems started in October 2018, we've seen 310 incidents of sexual exploitation and 345 incidents of sexual abuse of children in residential care. Now, and again, I think Robin alluded to this at a national level in terms of what the data shows. In Victoria, 6% of children in our care system are in residential care. Yet those children are the victims in 2/3 of sexual abuse incidents, 2/3, higher I think than the data you described, and over 80% of incidents of sexual exploitation. And we know that if anything, the incidence of these types of harms is likely to be far higher. We know, for example, that sexual exploitation seems to be less likely to be captured by current reporting systems. We continue to receive incident reports detailing devastating accounts of sexual abuse and exploitation of children. I won't share examples, but I can just share with you that some stay in my mind for a very long time. And of course, what we see in the incident data and the incident reports was confirmed in the inquiry that at the Commission we did last year into children's experience in care, which we called In Our Own Words. Most of the children we spoke to who had an experience in residential care told us of feeling or being unsafe there. And whilst their lack of safety took many forms, their accounts absolutely included sexual assault and abuse, sexual harassment, sexual pressure, particularly in terms of what they shared with us by other children and young people in the units. These accounts came from many, many young people, many teenage girls and boys, but also from children as young as 12 at the time we spoke to them. So I think, I mean, I would acknowledge, we know that lots of aspects of the system need to be changed to fully address harms to children and young people in residential care. Part of what is impressive for me about this project, part of what I think is important about this project, is that whilst I suspect everyone involved recognises that there are large systemic changes needed, there's a reality that some of that takes time, even with all of the political will and all of the investment that might be required. This project, this approach looks very much at what can be done at the very local level, at the level of the residential care unit, at the level of the relationships between workers and children and young people. We've heard today about the approach, about the focus on brave conversations about sex, about helping carers to build those all-important, safe, trusted, open relationships with young people in care, about making sure carers know the red flags and they know what to do about those. That seems to be such a critical aspect of the work. I don't imagine for a second any worker in residential care wants to see the children and young people with whom they're working experience this level of harm. So building capacity and confidence and a network of agencies to help address that seems to be all important. It certainly is fundamental to this work. And again, I think we've heard some of the really positive signs about the way some of these strategies work. Indicators that children and young people were at less risk. Those who were still going missing were missing less often and were more likely to stay in contact. Young people whose knowledge of sexual health and safety was improved. Their attitudes around gender equity and sexuality were stronger. Safer relationships with carers, or stronger, safe relationships. And indeed, quite clear indicators in this evaluation report that workers themselves got better at identifying harmful sexual behaviour, sexual exploitation and dating violence, and making sure that they acted. I'll finish in a moment. I just want to say, as I do, that of course, we would all agree one child sexually abused or harmed whilst they're in the care of the state is too many. Sadly, in any given week, based on the data I just described, there's far more than just one reported incident, far more. I've shared some hard truths about why I think this work is important, but it's Child Protection Week. And Child Protection is a week in part for raising awareness, but also for celebrating. And I have to say, this project is in my mind worth celebrating. Far from falling away as priorities shift, this project and its focus on addressing sexual harm perpetrated on some of our most vulnerable kids. It's been sustained, it's been implemented, it's been evaluated. It represents, through this report we're launching today, a really significant step in furthering our understanding of what works to prevent sexual harm. It doesn't have all the answers by any stretch, but it's making some really good headway. I want to say really, and we didn't line this up beforehand, did we, Robin? But very much in line with Robin's message. What matters, I think, now is that we build on this. Yes, we need to keep developing the evidence base, keep understanding what strategies work, keep evaluating, keep improving. But most importantly, I think we have to scale this up. This shouldn't just benefit children and young people in a small number of MacKillop houses. It shouldn't just benefit children in MacKillop. It should be benefiting every child and every young person in residential care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanna. That's a powerful address and one that'll stay with me. We are totally committed to staying the course, and this is the beginning. It's a great day to celebrate the point we've got to, but we are still at the beginning stages in some ways, because we've got to get it up into our foster care program, and particularly for those young people who are so at risk in our residential care and who've known so much instability in their own lives. Our deep dive reviews of young people, we've been doing a thing called Outcomes 100 at MacKillop, and we have very strong data through the very deep work we've done to understand the history of young people. But around 70% of them had experienced sexual abuse intrafamilially before they came into care. Over 90% extreme family violence. So they come in with very, very distorted views and very confused. They've also experienced great numbers of placement breakdown. Most have been over 10 placements before they've come to MacKillop. So we know we have to invest in our people. We have to support our carers. And training is not enough. It's the supervision, it's the consultation, it's wrapping around the house, it's bringing in our best experts and nimble partnership with child protection and police. And setting up a meeting for next week often doesn't do it. You've got to do something today. But you can only do today's work if you've built the trust over months, weeks, months, sometimes years, to actually gain the child's trust, because it's not normative for kids to disclose. Kids won't disclose sexual abuse, and they're tricked. And if they're getting drugs from perpetrators and money, you know, it's like they don't want to give that up. So it's very, very important that we persevere and we have our most expert people on this. So again, to end, thank you to our funders. We could not have done this without the John T. Reid Charitable Trust. We couldn't have done it without the Department of Human Services and the Child Protection Program, and particularly want to acknowledge Chris Esquini. The Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare, Deb Zaboris there, really got behind this program as well. And again, most importantly, to the children, the young people who've taught us, who've shown us how we can be more effective in making a difference. To our beautiful carers, I'd walk over hot coals for our residential carers. They are extraordinary people. And I think poorly understood when we talk about heroes and the acknowledgement, and particularly the, you know, with COVID-19, as Minister Donnellan said earlier, you know, we have heroes that walk amongst us in our residential carers. What they're doing now is extraordinary. The creativity, the patience, the perseverance. Sometimes I tear up when I'm, you know, with them and hearing what they're doing, or trying to support them in doing something else because it's not working, or what else can we do? They've had bake-offs and cook-offs and parties at home, and the sort of, you know, homeschooling. All that they're doing now through COVID-19 is just absolutely beautiful. So again, to our residential program and all who wrap around them to support frontline carers, and to our speakers today, particularly Minister Donnellan and Commissioner Leona Buchanan, to Gemma, and particularly to Kathy from Melbourne Uni, sincere thanks. And also to Nick Halfpenny and Anna Fried, who have been the engine room within MacKillop to make this work. And to all our operational people who've done it, who've done the training, and then the managers, the coordinators, the therapeutic practitioners, our principal practitioners. All these people have been involved in implementation and sustaining it. So this is, as I said, a joyful celebration in Child Protection Week, and something we're very proud of, and we assure you will be continuing. So thank you very much for your time today. All the best.